In this video, we start dealing with implementing the whole OAuth authentication process. Okay, so to start with, the whole process starts with the user clicking on the button that is representing their preferred provider. Possibly the user want to authenticate with Google or authenticate with GitHub. All right, so and just like I explained in one of our previous videos, whenever the user clicks the button, a request is sent to our server, all right? And on our server receiving that request, the server is going to generate an authorization URL that is going to redirect the user to the authorization server of the OAuth provider. And alongside that request is our client ID and some other details that we'll talk about in a minute, okay? So whenever the authorization server receives the request, then it is going to prompt the user to either accept or reject the permission. Okay, so we'll be dealing with all of this in this video. Okay, to activate an on-click event on this button, we'll be creating an event handler on our GitHub button. So you go to your OAuth buttons in the components directory. Where is it? Okay, so you go to the OAuth buttons, and then we are going to be having an on-click event. Okay, so here we're going to have a function. Then we are going to be passing a server action that we are going to create in a minute, and the name of the server action is going to be OAuth signing. So as argument, we are going to be passing the provider, which is GitHub. Okay, and we're also going to be passing an action argument. The action is going to be representing the action that the user wants to perform, that the user wants to sign in or the user wants to sign up. So how do we derive that action? We'll be deriving it from the path name of the current page that the user is on. If the user is on the sign in page, then action is going to be sign in. If they are in the sign up page, action is going to be sign up. And I should notify you that both for sign up and for sign in, the entire OAuth process for both sign up and sign in, they are the same. Okay, so now let's get the action. So we are going to be getting that from the path name. To get the path name in a client component, we should mark this a client component. Okay, since we are having an on-click event. Okay, so we're going to have a use client. So to get the path name in a client component, we are going to have a const, let's say action. Then we are going to have the use path name hook. Okay, so that's going to get us the path name. So we are going to check if the path name is equal to, let's say, sign in. Then we are going to say action is sign in. But if it is not equal to sign in, then we are going to say action is sign up. This is supposed to be a question mark. All right. So action is either sign in or sign up, depending on the path name. All right. So we are passing that to our server action. Now we need to create this server action. So we're going to go to our actions directory. Okay, where is our actions directory? All right, so inside of this, we're going to create the OAuth file. I'm going to have OAuth.ts. So first off, we need to mark this a server action file. Then we need to export as default and a sync function. I'm going to have a sync OAuth sign in. Okay, so let's import this in our file here. Okay, so I'm going to import that. Then I'm going to, okay, action is still giving us error. What is the error all about? Okay, that's because we've not accepted the parameter here. Okay, so first off, we're going to be having a provider parameter, and it's going to be of data type OAuth provider. We're going to create the type in a minute, and then this is going to be action. Okay, so we're also going to call this action. We're also going to create both types. So yeah, let's create a type. Let's call this OAuth provider, and it's going to be either GitHub. We're starting with GitHub, or it is Google. Those are the two we'll be dealing with. And then we're going to have a type action. Okay, so this is going to be either sign up or sign in. All right, so first thing we need to do here now inside of this server action is to create the URL that we're going to redirect our user to. So let's call it auth URL. Okay, so this is going to be of data type string. All right, so we're going to have a function that is going to create the URL for us. and to that function we'll be passing the provider and the action that sign in or sign up. Okay, and after creating the URL, we'll be redirecting our user to that URL. So we have auth URL. Okay, so now we need to create this function that is going to create that URL for us. All right, we could have written out all the logic here, but I want us to have all the logic that has to do with OAuth in a single file. So we're going to go to our lib directory, then we're going to create a file. We're going to call it OAuth client, just like we have read this client.ts. Okay, and now we're going to export an async function. Okay, async function. All right, so the name is going to be create URL. All right, so we need to import that here. Create URL. All right, so what is the problem here? Argument action. Okay, sorry, there was a typo either here or in the other side. Okay, let's go to here. Okay, so this is where the sign. All right, that should get rid of that. Sign in. Okay, that should get rid of that in our button. Okay, so we're good with that. So here we're going to have a provider here, provider, and it's going to be of data type OAuth provider. So we need to import that data type. Let's import it here so that we don't have to be typing the same thing, right? So we're going to export here. We're also going to export this also. All right, I'm going to save that. Okay, so we're going to go to our OAuth client, OAuth provider. All right, and this is going to be action. Okay, so we also need to import the action data type from our server. Okay, so let's mark this file a server only file so that we won't mistakenly import something from here into the client side. So we're going to have a server only. Now the next thing is to create our URL. Okay, so we're going to have URL, then we're going to have the URL constructor function. All right, okay, so we need to provide the authorization endpoint of the GitHub provider that we are dealing with. So to get that, you can go to the GitHub documentation. We'll deal with this in a minute. Here you are going to be having all the details that you need to implement this OAuth authentication. Okay, to get, yes, this is how the page looks like. To get here, just go to your favorite search engine and type GitHub OAuth documentation. Then you are going to have this link, right? So if you click on this link, it's going to direct you to that page. Let me zoom this in. Okay, this is where we are currently. If you look at the sidebar, you have authorizing OAuth apps. Okay, so if I zoom this in, I'm not going to have this sidebar anymore. So on this page, you have all the details you need to implement that. All right, so this is the endpoint that you are going to redirect your user to. Okay, so we are going to copy this. All right, to save ourselves some time, we are going to gather all the details we need at once. Okay, so that we don't have to be going back and forth. This is another endpoint where we are going to direct our server to get the access token after the user has granted the permission. We're also going to grab this endpoint. We need one more endpoint where we are going to be getting the user details from the resource server of the OAuth provider. Okay, so we're going to grab all of them all at once so we don't have to be swinging up and down. Okay, so to gather all of those details, we are going to be creating an object here where we are going to put all of those details. So let me say const. Okay, now I'm going to call it OAuth configs. Okay, here we're going to gather all the details we need. First off, let's deal with GitHub. So whenever we are dealing with Google, we're just going to put all the details inside of a Google object. All right, so here we are going to have the, let's call it auth URL. Okay, I'm going to paste that here. That's going to be a string. I'm going to paste that. Then next we are going to be getting the token URL. Let's call it token URL. Okay, so after the user has granted permission, that is the endpoint where we are going to be getting the token. So let's scroll down. Okay, so I'm going to copy this also. All right, let's just do all of those at once. And after that, we need the user URL where we're going to be getting the user details after getting the access token, user URL. That's correct. Right, so let's go down. This is the user URL. We're also going to copy that also. Okay, so let's go to, yeah, I'm going to paste that. And now we also need to get our client ID so that we just have everything together in a spot. So here we're going to have env. We already have that in our env schema. Okay, dot GitHub client ID. Here we're also going to have a client secret. Okay, secret. Okay, so we're going to have env dot GitHub client secret. Okay, and after that, we also need to provide the scope, all right, which is going to represent the details that we want to access on our users account. So if you let's go to scope. Okay, let me zoom out. There is, okay, here we have scope at the sidebar. If you click on this, we're going to have more details on scope. Okay, so everything we need to get from our user, this scope covers it. This user image covers every details that we need to access from our user. We need just the name and the email address. Okay, so we are going to be, as you can see, let me zoom this in. So the user grants read access to the user's email address. Okay, so we just need the name and the email address. That is going to be our scope. Okay, now let's go to our app, and then I'm going to paste that. So that's everything that we need from GitHub to implement this. I'm going to close my sidebar. Okay, so here we need to get this object. Okay, so here before this URL, all right, let's call it config. Okay, so that is going to be our OAuth config. Then we are going to get the actual provider that the user want to authenticate with. If it is Google, this provider is going to be Google. Then we are going to be getting the Google details from this object. Okay, we're having this TypeScript error here, elements. Okay, OAuth can't be used to index type of this. Okay, so to get rid of those TypeScript error, I'm just going to make this a generic function. So we're going to restrict this to the type OAuth provider. Okay, so we're going to say our provider is of data type T. All right, so we still have this error, type T cannot be used to index GitHub. Okay, this is because T can either be GitHub or Google, but in this object we only have GitHub. So for now, let's just duplicate this to get rid of that error. All right, so we're going to call this Google. We know that that is not our Google credentials, but to get rid of that error. Okay, so now the error is gone. Okay, now we need to pass the authorization URL of our GitHub to this. So we're going to have config dot auth URL. Okay, now we need to set some parameters on our URL. All right, we're going to have URL dot search params. Okay, dot set. One of the parameters that we need to set is our client ID. It's very important. If you look at the documentation, let's go back. This is in scope. Let's go back to authorizing OAuth apps. Okay, so if you look at the documentation, there are some details. So we need the client ID, the direct URL. This is optional. We're not going to be providing that. We also need the scope. Okay, we need state. We need something called state. And this one is also optional, but we also provide it so that the user will always be prompted anytime they want to authenticate with GitHub. If you don't provide this, the first time the user authorizes your app, for subsequent authorizations, GitHub is not going to prompt them if you don't provide this. Okay, but the behavior we want is that we want GitHub to always prompt our user every time they want to authenticate. So we need to provide prompts, we need to provide states, we need to provide scope, we need to provide this. So first off, let's start with client ID. Okay, so the value of our client ID is going to be config. Okay, here we have the client ID. After that, we also need to set, we have our search params dot set. Okay, then we're going to have the response type. What kind of response do we expect from our provider? We need the authorization code. That's what we expect is an authorization code represented by code. Okay, here we're also going to set the scope. Okay, and here our scope is going to, we've already written out our scope. Okay, so it's going to be config dot scope, which is our user email. We have the scope here. Okay, and we also need to set prompt. So we have url dot search params dot set. Okay, so here we have a prompt. This is actually optional, but we want GitHub to always prompt our user every time the user wants to authenticate with GitHub. So we have search params dot set. Okay, so here we are going to provide a redirect URI, redirect URI. Okay, ensure that you write URI, not URL. As you can see here, what we have here is a URI. Okay, so here we are going to construct our redirect URI. Here we are going to have interpolation. This is going to start with our base URL. If you go to your env, okay, so you have this base. All right, so we're going to start there. Then we're going to have forward slash GitHub. For Google, it's going to be forward slash Google. Okay, so here we're going to have env, all right, dot base URI. Okay, so here we are going to have forward slash GitHub. All right, or let's not add code GitHub. Okay, you know, I want to make this dynamic for all providers. If it is Google, then this is going to cause error. So rather than add coding it, we're going to pass the provider variable. Okay, so if it is Google, then provider is going to be Google. If it is GitHub, provider is also going to be GitHub. All right, so here we are going to pass action as a param, so that this action is going to be signifying the action that the user wants to perform, either sign in or sign up. Okay, so after setting our redirect URI, we also need to provide something that we call state. Okay, all right, so this is going to be state. We need to create this state. Okay, let's pass the variable. We are going to create that variable in a minute. So the function of this state, if you go to this documentation, the state is a random string. Okay, it is used to protect against cross-site request forgery attacks. Okay, so to create the state, we are going to be creating a random string with random bytes. Then we are going to save that string on our user browser. So when the response is coming back for this request that will be redirecting our user to the authorization server, when the response is coming along, then this state is going to come along with the response. Then when we have the response, we are going to be checking the state that we stored in the user browser and the state that is coming from the response. Then we compare both of them. If they are the same, that means it is the same user that is making the request. But if they are not the same, that means we are having a forgery attack there. Then we are going to abort the whole process. Okay, so we store the state in the user browser, and we also send the state along to the request. So when the response is coming, we check the state in the user browser and the state that is on the request. If they are the same, then it is the same user that is making the request. But if they are not the same, then we abort the process. So that is the function of this state. So here we are going to create that state. So I'm going to have const state. Okay, we're going to have, it's going to be an async function. We're going to call it create state. Okay, so down here we're going to create the function. We're going to have an async function. All right, the name is going to be create state. All right, it is not accepting any parameter. Okay, so here we're going to have const state is going to be a random string. So we're going to have a random byte from crypto. Okay, ensure you import that. Then we want, let's say, 64 random bytes. So we need to convert that to string with x representation, hexadecimal. Okay, so that's going to create a random string for us. All right, so we are going to be storing the string in the user browser. All right, and we also send the string along with the request we are sending to the authorization server of the OAuth provider. So we need to import this set cookie function. We created the function. Let's go to our session.ts file. Okay, so we created a function here with the name of set cookie. So we'll be utilizing this function. We need to import it from our session. Okay, VS Code is not providing that, so let's import that. Okay, I'm going to come here, import. All right, we have our set cookie. Okay, from, then we're going to have, we should have session.ts here. Okay, so that is why we are not having that suggestion. We did not export the function. Okay, so now we are going to be using that function to set the cookie here. So the cookie key, we need to create a constant. So I'm going to say the constant is state cookie key. All right, so let's create the constant here. We'll be needing it in several places. I'm going to have const cookie this session key, state cookie key. Okay, going to be state cookie key. Okay, and we're going to call it OAuth state. All right, that's going to be the key of our cookie. Then the value is going to be state that we just created. Okay, we need to provide the expiration seconds. So we're going to have env dot cookie expiration seconds. So now this is going to set this string. It is going to store it in the cookie storage of the user browser. We also need to return the state so that we can send it along the request to the OAuth server. Okay, so when the response is coming, we can compare the state that is coming with the response with the state that is in the user browser. Okay, so we have the state here, then we have passed it along on the URL. Now we need to return this URL. Okay, so I'm going to have return. Okay, then I'm going to have URL dot to string. We need to convert it to string. Okay, so it is this URL that we are redirecting the user to on this point. Okay, so that's all we need to send that request to redirect the user to the OAuth provider authorization server. Okay, so now let's test out. So to test up what we've done, we're going to click on this GitHub button, then it's going to redirect us to GitHub, where it's going to ask the user, and so you can see my accounts now, to either authorize our application. So you can see the name of the app that we set when we were registering our app. Okay, because we did not provide any logo, that's why we have this. If we provided the logo, then you are going to be seeing the logo here. So if the user cancelled the request now, then GitHub is going to respond with an error. Okay, so this was the redirect URL that we provided, but because we've not handled that endpoint, that is why we have this 404 page. Okay, and if you look at our server, okay, so you can see that there was an error in the response that we got. Okay, and that error was access denied. That is because the user denied the request. Okay, but if the user granted the request, to see that again, let's go back to, okay, so let's click on this. That's going to direct us there. Okay, so now we're going to authorize the app. Okay, so I'm going to click on this, then we are directed back to the redirect URL that we provided. Okay, but because we've not handled the endpoint, like I said, that is why we have this 404 page. But if you check our response now, you can see we have a code. This is the authorization code that the authorization server responded with. So with this authorization code now, we can request for access token from the authorization server, but this request now is going to be between our own server and the authorization server. The user is no longer going to be in the loop. Okay, so requesting for the access token and handling this redirect URL where the authorization server is going to redirecting the user, will be handling all of this in the next video. Okay, don't forget to give this video a like, and please subscribe to the channel to see more of the videos as I will be releasing them. Okay, so for all of that, I'll be seeing you in the next video.